This is Beyond the Brand with Dontaye Carter, where we go behind the scenes and tell stories about some of today's most dynamic brands, businesses, and the people behind them. So sit back, relax, and listen to Beyond the Brand. Beyond the Brand. Beyond the Brand. Beyond the Brand.
What's going on, everybody? This is Dontaye Carter with Beyond the Brand. And for the last hour, probably closer to the last 90 minutes, I've had an amazing conversation with a good friend, PR professional, Stephanie Lyttle. We've sat down, and every time we've conversed, the conversations have gotten deeper on an intellectual level, just talking about PR and everything involved in it. And I wanted to just bring her on to the show because if I'm this inspired by her, I know you all will be as well. Stephanie, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, thank you, Dontaye. My name is Stephanie. I am the Vice President of a marketing and advertising agency in Montreal, Canada, but I head up their PR division, and I've been working in public relations for about 20 years now. I think I started my career in nonprofit organizations, and then I moved on to the agency side. But it's for me, it's a passion. I love watching and seeing how people interact and communicating with people, and I believe that it really is something that keeps us connected. And I've also seen the evolution of how things have changed, and I think that's also very fascinating.
Yeah, it's so true. Now, when we first started talking, we were going to have us a conversation on COVID-19 from a PR standpoint, what we were seeing, what you were seeing in America versus Canada and vice versa. You know, I just want to share a little bit of that conversation with our audience. What have you been seeing?
So from our stand, we're looking at a different communications from the different political sides of things. On our side in Canada, we've had very proactive communications. I think that the country has been very reassured. We've taken on some measures that are much more extreme than from what, Dontaye, you were sharing with me. And I think that we're looking at it from our side and looking at what the U.S. is doing. And we're just sort of trying to figure out from a global perspective and what's going on, because this is a pandemic. And it was very interesting to discuss with you, Dontaye, all of the differences in the way that our governments are reacting and how this has had an effect on the actual, I would say, comportment of the people who are going outside and socially interacting with each other. So I just, this to me was very, very fascinating to hear your perspective. And I think that from our side, you were a little bit shocked to hear how we adjusted to it as well.
I mean, it just seemed like you all was so forward thinking when it comes to it. You know, I mean, everything. And I love the words that you said earlier where you said you guys have kind of moved in an economically savvy way, but also being socially driven. And I just sat back and I'm just like, why can't we do that? You know, why can't we really just focus on that? Everything from you just sharing about the drive-through testing. I mean, it's just, you know, in my mind, it's just, I mean, that's just common sense. You know, it's you know, and then I also love the quote that you had where you were sharing, you said, no PR can fix bad business decisions.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think that so often people just think PR can just fix any and everything. And it's just like, no, if it's not implemented properly from the beginning, like there will be an outcome that's not desirable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of people, and I think even to this day, people just don't understand the role of public relations. I mean, we're not there to spin and change the truth. And no matter what business decision that you make, we can't fix it from a public relations standpoint. And what we're seeing is a lot of backlash to some bad business decisions that have been happening, not just in the United States, but around the world, in terms of leaders and you know, your rogue CEOs, for that lack of a better word, who are not actually communicating effectively with their key constituents. So that to me is very sad, because if there was any time, now is the time to step it up and to be responsible and to communicate truthful and honest and factual information to the public.
And one of the things that I love that you mentioned too is when you mentioned how Canada was, what was the word, as equally unprepared as we were in terms
Yes.
of what's going on with this, but just how quickly you all have ramped up your responses and ensuring that you really start to quarantine and limit the spread of this virus within the country. And for me, I just kind of sit back and I ask the question of, wow, why can't we be that proactive? Because I've been sitting back and, as I stated, my wife, she's a doctor. I'm hearing what she's saying. I have friends that are doctors. I'm listening to them, and it's just like, wow, for me to hear this information and want to say, okay, let's implement X, Y, and Z. It's I don't know. I would think that, our leaders in place would be thinking the same way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that what I would say to that is that it's difficult to make these decisions. There's so much involved. There's so many different factors, and even across Canada, there may have been some provinces that have reacted differently than other provinces. There are some provinces that are more advanced than other provinces, but that I have to applaud what they've been doing, because so far they've made those difficult decisions. They've put the backlash of things that could potentially happen, loss of jobs, uncertainty, that people are scared, and they've been continually sending out messages of support, whether it's financial or what have you. The communications that they've been providing to us and sending to us has been overall very, very supportive. Can't say that there aren't people who feel like it could be done better, and in some instances it could. Yes, we agree that we were not as prepared as we would have liked to have been, but at least that was communicated to us so we understand.
Yeah. It's so amazing how I'm trying to think about the distance between Atlanta and Montreal. It's got to be what? Mm-hmm. We got to be looking at what, over 1,000 miles?
I have no idea, but I'm sure we're not close.
No, we're not.
Snow right now, do you?
No. I'm looking it up on a map right now, and let's see, via car. Let's see how long it'll take. It's loading. So you are 1,214 miles away. 18-hour drive.
Right.
18 hours. That's a long drive. But I think about just despite that distance, kind of what we were talking about before, just how we're at the root of it all social beings, and how we were able to connect over just talking about PR and COVID and how different countries and different industries are handling this pandemic. Mm-hmm. And it blows me away. But I also wanted to ask you, when do you think you fell in love with PR? What was that moment where you said, you know what, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Oh, okay. I can tell you that because I know the moment exactly. So I was in university studying. I started studying. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a university professor. That's what I thought I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So I was studying at Ottawa University, and I was taking all of the appropriate courses to do that. And then I moved to Montreal, and I went to another university, and I was studying marketing. And back then, not to date myself, but public relations and communications, it wasn't an established field. Mm-hmm. So, people were doing it, but there weren't the actual sort of like norms and best practices that we've been able to establish today. Mm. So I was doing this marketing degree, and I had to do like statistical analysis and economic things, and I was like, oh, that's so not me. So I ended up going to McGill. And I was going there to further my, marketing degree. and I picked up a pamphlet, and it was public relations.
Wow.
And I looked at it, and the pamphlet basically outlined absolutely everything that I'd done. I had been studying film, I'd been studying photography, I'd been studying philosophy, I'd been studying history, I had been studying all of these things for all of this time, and finally I found the program, and the sort of like where I wanted to go in life. So I called my mom, and I was like, "Mom, I found it. This is for me." And so I pursued my studies. I finished my studies, and I immediately got right into it, and I've never looked back.
Wow. And so tell us about some of those first few jobs, some of the experiences you had, and what you learned.
So my first job in public relations was working for a nonprofit organization that was based in Quebec. And this nonprofit organization was trying to get information to men about prostate cancer. And this was at a time way before Movember, way before anything. And specifically in Quebec, because none of these men had any information in French. Even though I'm an Anglophone, I'm bilingual, I speak French, but I also understand that there are some, social differences and some ways of communicating that have to be different. So my first job was to basically put this nonprofit organization on the map. We needed to raise a lot of money. We needed to fund research in Quebec, and we needed to educate and help men understand and break the taboo about prostate cancer. And for me, the biggest challenge was, as a woman, how am I going to do that, right? I don't have a prostate. So I did it like very, the way that I like to do it is immerse myself. I went to every single patient support group meeting on the Anglophone side, on the Francophone side. I tapped into what men were scared about, what they needed to know about, and then I was able to translate that and communicate that into the website and an info line and all of the different communications channels that we could offer at that time. And the other thing that we were looking at doing was we needed obviously corporate support, but because nobody really knew about us, we had to create that grassroots support so that corporate money would follow. So I was able to start a walk. And don't forget, we're going back like 15 years ago. And 15 years later, they're still doing that walk, but we can get to the COVID situation where they've stopped. But we've been able to raise about $15 million in Quebec to help support men and help them understand what their diagnosis is, sort of like support them through their diagnosis and provide them with information that they need. At the same time, providing very, very needed funding to help advance research into that area. So I was very proud of that. And that brought me, because I was working with an agency, I felt like I had done kind of like given them all of the basics. And that brought me into an agency. And the agency that I ended up joining was the largest public relations agency in Canada. But it enabled me to continue to work with the nonprofit because I just did it as a volunteer. And guess what? I still do it.
Wow.
I was on the phone with them today, and we were talking about different ways that we can help transition from big events, which they're no longer going to be able to do, to finding different ways and innovative ways to be able to make sure that they're still sustainable.
Wow. That's incredible. That is I'm just sitting back and I'm just taking it all in. And so, I kind of just sit back and I'm just, I'm talking to a legend.
That's their story. Oh, no.
I'm speaking to a legend.
Hardly. Hardly. I I feel like I'm speaking to a lady.
Oh, no, 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 no.
No, but I mean, and that's where we bring it back to where we were discussing before, where we connected through someone that a mutual connection on Facebook, and then that ended up to that person was like, "Hey, how do you two know each other?" And it was because we keep commenting on
your
things from a
pages.
public relations perspective, and that turned into a conversation, and I think it's turned into a great friendship.
Oh, I think it has as well. I think it has.
Good.
I sit back and again, I am extremely impressed with your resume, what you've been able to do, and I just one of the questions I've just been a little curious about is just what do you what are those goals that you still want to accomplish? What are some of the things that you still aim to achieve?
I mean, that's a tough question because I want to achieve a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some areas that I'm a little bit more passionate about than others. Obviously, with my background in, healthcare communications, I think, like, if I'm looking at the COVID situation right now, I wish that things could be handled better. But again, from a communications perspective, some of the business decisions that are being made by the politicians are out of my hand. Yeah. I wish I could help them communicate that better. Then I have other, interests and other areas that I'd like to support. I think that we discussed that earlier in terms of looking at how race relations are held and being managed within, our different spheres. I'd love to be able to make a bridge and a way that we can do better in understanding each other, where we come from and where we're going. And I'd like to sort of like reset in a way, because I think that we had made such tremendous progress under President Barack Obama, and I feel like we've gone backwards in a way. And I would love to bring that forward.
One of the things I've been curious too about, because I'm going to come back to a COVID question as well. How much do you think, because I feel like in America, we're so, we've kind of been brought up to focus on American politics, local politics. And so you've really got to be intentional about looking at the political structure around the world. And in Montreal, how is it? Do you feel like there is there that intentional? Okay, I have to be intentional about looking at the politics around the world, or is it more natural for you all?
I think that our government has shown us a tremendous amount of support. That they have shown us that they are looking at the leaders in the world right now, the World Health Organization, and all of the learnings that they're getting out of Italy and the various countries around the world, and that they're implementing those learnings into how they are managing the situation here. So they've locked us down, they've shut down everything, and it's difficult. I'll be honest with you, it's not perfect.
Yeah.
But it is it's being received in a very civilized manner. So you're not seeing mass panic here. People aren't like freaking out. Well, of course, we did run out of toilet paper. But the companies have come back and said, we're going to be working overtime and we're going to get those back, and they were back. And so you're seeing very different behaviors that are happening, but I think that because the communications has been so consistent, it has been reinforced. It's been delivered to us with a serious tone, fact-based, and people are responding in an appropriate way.
Gotcha. And so, what are some of the decisions that are being made around COVID, do you think should have been handled better, and how would you work with the business world to help them to communicate their agenda much better?
I think that from a communications perspective, We always look at being transparent, honest, and fact-based. We want to know where we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. Those are the three principles of everything. I think that a lot of businesses could do better in being respectful of where we're at right now. And so that would mean like toning down product and marketing information on social media, focusing on how they're going to be supporting their employees and reassuring people. So I think we could do better in that. And I think that overall, we just have to have an understanding that this is a global pandemic. It's not going away. And we have to adjust. And so what I tell my clients is we don't have to stop. We just have to shift. So what we need to do is shift the conversation, whether it's from social media to direct communications with our clients, or shift it into different areas. We don't need to stop business. We just need to shift the way that we're doing things, because things have changed and we have to be respectful about that. So the message I'm saying is don't panic. We can still business as usual, but we're shifting.
Wow. On that note, because it was just such a powerful moment. I don't want to get away from it. But wow, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it was kind of last minute and you pivoted well. And so I really appreciate you tuning in. For everybody here, I'm Dontaye Carter with Beyond the Brand, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
This is Beyond the Brand with Dontaye Carter, where we go behind the scenes and tell stories about some of today's most dynamic brands, businesses, and the people behind them. So sit back, relax, and listen to Beyond the Brand.